Hello friends. Friends, today we would be doing a very important topic. The topic is basically a continuity of what we have been already doing in this particular regard. काफ़ी important topic चल रहे हैं. And just before we start off with this class, just make me sure that I'm audible so that everything is comparatively very much clear to all the students. आवाज़ सबको आ रही है? Okay. तो काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक जो अभी हमारी क्लास में हम लेने वाले हैं, दैट इज बेसिकली द कंसिडरेशन ऑफ द रोल ऑफ आयरन दैट वाज देयर इन द कंटेक्स्ट ऑफ लेटर वैदिक एज. तो इसको पूरे के पूरे टॉपिक को हम एनालाइज करेंगे. देन द नेक्स्ट टॉपिक दैट वी वुड बी टेकिंग अप, द फर्स्ट इज बेसिकली जो हम अभी डिस्कस करेंगे, दैट इज रोल दैट ऑफ आयरन in later Vedic age period that has been there. The next topic is a very very important topic, that is basically what is known as the 6th century BC. ये टॉपिक है. तो आज की क्लास में हम कोशिश करेंगे यहाँ तक अपने आप को लिमिट करें और इस टॉपिक को बहुत ही कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव तरीके से करें. 6th century BC is known by different names. For example, the age of second urbanization. Firstly, not only age of second urbanization, but intellectual revolution also. Age of intellectual revolution. The age where various social, cultural and economic development also took place in this particular regard. उस एंगल को भी हम काफ़ी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव तरीके से करने की कोशिश करेंगे. हाउ इंटेलेक्चुअल रेवोल्यूशन के साथ साथ ही फॉर एग्जांपल मगधन एम्पायर कैसे मर्ज हुआ, हाउ जन गॉट ट्रांसफर्ड इनटू जनपद, हाउ दे गॉट ट्रांसफर्ड इनटू महाजनपद, and later on what were the factors that were responsible for the rise of Magध as an empire. तो आज वाली क्लास में हमारा टॉपिक इसके ऊपर ही फोकस रहेगा एंड वी विल बी ट्राइंग कि इसी टॉपिक को हम कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव तरीके से कवर भी करें. चलो आगे मूव करते हैं. First topic that we would be doing is the role that is basically being played by the iron. The notes have already been given, handouts has already been given to all the students. अभी आपका फोकस क्या है कि basically to understand this topic in a very very comprehensive format. Friends, history as an optional is not difficult. Very very important thing that you should be doing. Difficult नहीं है, पर इसको understanding develop करनी है. अगर एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग डेवलप होगी, कोई भी क्वेश्चन आपको कहीं से भी पूछे एग्जामिनर, यू विल डेफिनेटली बी इन अ पोजीशन टू कवर दैट क्वेश्चन इन अ वेरी वेरी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव फॉर्मेट और बहुत ही आसानी से उस टॉपिक को खत्म भी कर पाओगे एंड अच्छे मार्क्स लेके, अच्छे आंसर लेके अच्छे मार्क्स भी स्कोर कर पाओगे. द फर्स्ट इज बेसिकली द रोल ऑफ आयरन दैट वाज देयर. व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट आयरन, the earliest evidence of iron, when you talk about it, we are basically discovered from Atranji Kheda. अतरंजी खेड़ा से आयरन को डिस्कवर वहां पे किया गया था. फर्स्टली. सेकेंडली, इट इज ऑल्सो इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट what was the impact iron played on the social, the cultural, the economic, the political aspect of the life at that particular point of time. There are different historians, different researchers or different archaeologists that are there. They have put forward their point of view. And we would be going with proper logical reasoning that would be there. बहुत अच्छे तरीके से करवाया जाएगा and everything would basically be going on in a very chronological format. There are various historians which have given their point of view, and one of the point of view, and even though that point of view has been supported by a historian, for example R.S. Sharma. Now, what these historians have to say and what was the point that was supported by R.S. Sharma. They said that it was iron that played a very very important role basically in the consideration of agriculture context. They said that n number of agricultural implements have been found from different parts of this Ganga Yamuna Doab region, from different areas. For example, even Hastinapur and other places, they said that iron had played, various iron implements they have been found. Found, for example, from Hastinapur and other places. And these iron implements were basically used for agriculture purposes. They say that iron was basically used by these people for carrying on various agriculture activities, and that played a very important role in, for example, in producing what is called in enabling to have the production of and reach a peak where we could be in a position to attain agriculture surplus. According to them, they say that iron help in sowing of the seed comparatively to a much deeper extent. डीपर लेवल के ऊपर हम आयरन वहाँ पे सो कर सकते हैं, आयरन से हम कोई भी सीड सो कर सकते हैं. एंड बिकॉज ऑफ द सोइंग दैट वाज कंपैरेटिवली मच मोर डीपर, द प्रोडक्टिविटी इंक्रीज्ड, एग्रीकल्चर प्रोडक्शन इंक्रीज्ड. As we moved into this Ganga Yamuna Doab region, the productivity, the fertility of that particular region, clubbed with the coming up of the iron technology and the use of the iron basically for making various agriculture implements or implements tools that could be used for in the context of agriculture, that led to increase in the productivity. And as the productivity increased, as the agriculture surplus could be increased, the same concept which we have done earlier also, that led to coming up of the art and craft, and for example thereby giving boost to trade and commercial activities also. तो कह रहे थे दिस एज बेसिकली जब 6th सेंचुरी बीसी तक आते आते हम 6th सेंचुरी बीसी को एज ऑफ सेकेंड अर्बनाइजेशन भी बोला जाएगा. बट जैसे हरप्पन सिविलाइजेशन है, what was the early Harappans they were doing? They were basically preparing a solid material base on which the technological and other advancements could be, intellectual advancements could be reached. So what I am saying is over here is there are certain historians which were also supported by a historian called R.S. Sharma. They say that agriculture in the initial phase played a very important context, important role in increasing the agriculture production. And it was this agriculture production that was there that enabled the deeper plowing, iron enabled deeper plowing, and therefore production could be increased. Agriculture surplus was there. Art and craft activities started as some people got free. More people they got free, they got engaged into various aggregation of various trade and craft activities. And dhire in the at the end of what is called as the later Vedic period, iron played an important role, and there were certain towns they started coming up. जैसे हमने किया था ऐत्रेया में, वहाँ पे क्या था? The word Nagar has been mentioned in the later Vedic period. And therefore they say that it was the role that was basically played by iron at that particular point of time. This is one point of view that has been given and that has been supported also. Another point of view has been there. The point of view has been put forward which by other historians. They say that the role that was played by iron in the context of agriculture was comparatively very limited one. They say that the role that was basically played by iron, initial phase mein, historians they said that and supported by R.S. Sharma, and say that it was important one, the role that was played. But there are other historians which are saying that the role that is comparatively at this point of time was comparatively limited one. The recent historians they are coming up that it was basically a limited role that was basically played at this point of time. बहुत बड़ा कोई भी रोल कोई भी प्ले करने को नहीं मिला. And they say that they various historians, for example like Nehar Ranjan Roy and historians like D.K. Chakravarti, they said that the use of the iron was comparatively very limited. As agar had this possibility, had there been the more use of the iron for irrigation, for agricultural purpose, more number of iron tools and implements would have been found. But the tools that are found are comparatively very very limited in nature and context. बहुत ही लिमिटेड टूल्स मिले हैं. अगर एग्रीकल्चर के ऊपर, एग्रीकल्चर के कंटेक्स्ट में इतने ज़्यादा टूल्स हमें मिल रहे होते जिस तरीके से कहा जा रहा है, then more number of tools have been found. Had they been used, but they say that the role that was played by iron in the context of agriculture is comparatively very limited. On the other hand, they quote two literatures also, not only this, but various literary evidences. For example, Shatpad Brahman. Or even Mahabharata. They say that, both of these, they say that. For example, in Shatpad Brahman, the story of Videha Madhav that has been given, we have already covered that thing. Story of Videha Madhav, along with priest Gautam Rahugana, has been given. And the story goes, जैसे हमने किया था, they reached on the bank of river Gandak or river Sadanira in Bihar. And it was basically by burning the forest that these people have reached over there. जंगल को clear करने के लिए iron का use नहीं किया गया था. It was basically the fire that was basically being used to clear the jungle at that point of time. Fire का use किया जा रहा था. If the fire was basically being used, तो मतलब iron का comparatively limited होगा. Not all this, when they say that, for example, when in Mahabharata also, very stories are been given that when a new capital has to be established, even by the Pandavas, they have to clear the jungles, and for clearing the jungles, what was important was that the help of Agni was basically being taken. तो वहाँ पे भी नहीं बताया गया कि जंगल को कट किया गया था. वहाँ पे क्या बताया गया? द जंगल वाज बेसिकली क्लियर्ड एंड इट वाज अग्नि दैट प्लेड अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल. इसको जला के क्लियर किया गया था. देयरफॉर not only that various recent researchers they have said, Chakravarti and Roy, but also various other evidences, earlier literary evidences like Shatpad Brahman or Mahabharata, both of them they quote the same thing only, that it was fire that was basically used at this point of time. Sorry. Fire that was basically used at this point of time in the context of cleaning, and not, for example, in the context of plowing. Iron was not used. The use of iron comparatively was limited, and even if we talk about this region, the iron was basically used in the context of making weapons. किसके लिए यूज हो रहा था? It was used in the context of making weapons at this particular point of time. Later on, various art and craft activities they emerged in the context of making weapons also. Now weapons को भी अलग-अलग तरीके से बनाना है. Therefore in that particular context अलग-अलग तरीके के weapons बनाने के लिए एक weapon के context में एक art and craft के अलग-अलग activities emerge होगी, और जैसी अलग-अलग activities के वो art and craft, therefore what I am saying is that gave rise to secondary economic activities. तो वहां पे क्या हुआ? हमारे सेकेंडरी इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज भी कंपैरेटिवली धीरे धीरे इमर्ज हो रही है. आयरन प्लेड अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड अ फंडामेंटल रोल इन स्ट्रेंथनिंग द मिलिट्री पावर ऑल्सो. वेपन्स है, अदर एरियाज आर नॉट हैविंग द वेपन्स. देयरफॉर द टेरिटोरियल एक्सपेंशन टुक प्लेस. Expansion took place. So therefore, Jan that was there earlier at this point of time got transformed into what is known as a Janpad. Why? Because they had moved into a important area that was comparatively much more fertile also. Not only this, another thing that is there, that what gives us an evidence is that it was irrigation that was or agriculture that was done, and the iron plow was not required at this point of time. For example, when these Aryans they moved into this Ganga Yamuna Doab region, जब गंगा यमुना द्वाब रीजन में वहां पे आए, वहां पे वी नो दैट अराउंड 7500 BC, अराउंड 7000 BC, व्हाट वाज देयर, द पीपल ऑफ वेलन वैली, they already were producing good variety of the rice, and they had the knowledge of the wet paddy cultivation also. इनको वेट पैडी कल्टीवेशन का ऑलरेडी नॉलेज है, एंड व्हेन दीज आर्यंस they came in contact with these people, therefore they learned the technique of from them. And as this area is comparatively not that much hard, and the timber that has been found in this particular region was used basically as a wooden to make the wooden plowshare, therefore as the land that was comparatively more fertile and soft also, therefore the wooden plowshare was sufficient in this particular regard. Sufficient किसके context में? Sufficient in the context that how this more and more agriculture production could be there. So therefore when these moved into this area, तो वहाँ पे बहुत ही ज़्यादा बड़े लेवल के ऊपर या किसी भी बड़े लेवल के ऊपर आपको आयरन प्लो शेयर की जरूरत नहीं थी. As the area, the land was comparatively fertile, therefore there is as every possibility that the wooden plow share would be used, and they learned the technique of wet paddy cultivation from the people who were already living in this UP region. तो वहाँ पे क्या हुआ? They learnt everything from there. Therefore, iron played an important role. But the role was basically in the context of how the political life was basically to be transformed. When you take into consideration the economic aspect of iron, in the later Vedic period, it was basically limited, as the majority of the implements that were made was basically in the context of weapons that were made, and this making of the weapon gave rise to what is basically called as art and craft, or those activities which were basically in the context of iron, and so the iron weapons could be made, and secondary economic activities was started over here at this point of time. तो वहां पे क्या हुआ? सेकेंडरी इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज भी कंप्यूटराइज हो गए. तो पॉलिटिकल यूनिफिकेशन के कंटेक्स्ट में जब पॉलिटिकल लाइफ किस तरीके से ट्रांसफॉर्म हो गई थी, जन गॉट ट्रांसफॉर्म्ड इनटू जनपद, द रोल ऑफ द आयरन वाज इंपॉर्टेंट, बट ऑन द अदर कंटेक्स्ट इट वाज बेसिकली यूज्ड फॉर मेकिंग वेपन्स, एंड इट्स इकोनॉमिक सिग्निफिकेंस प्रेजेंटली इन द लेटर वैदिक पीरियड वाज ओनली टू अ लिमिटेड एक्सटेंट. आई होप इट इज क्लियर टू एवरीवन. जस्ट गो थ्रू द नोट्स एंड देन वी वुड बी मूविंग फॉरवर्ड टू द नेक्स्ट पर्टिकुलर चैप्टर. एक बार पढ़ो इसको अच्छे से. Just go through the notes. कोई इशू नहीं है, अभी तो स्टार्टिंग प्रोसेस है. आंसर राइटिंग में भी आपको पूरा हेल्प हो जाएगा अकॉर्डिंगली. डू नॉट वरी फॉर दैट. चलो जी आगे मूव करते हैं. Next is a very very important topic in the regard of 6th century BC. काफ़ी ज़्यादा important topic है basically 6th century BC. It is important in the context that it was a gradual evolution that has been going on. Gradual evolution. That has been going on. This gradual evolution had reached its peak with the passage of time. 6th century BC, gradual evolution has reached its peak का मतलब क्या हुआ? Whatever process that was started in the context of political aspect, in the context of economic aspect, in the context of somewhat, for example, rudimentary format, religious, or for example, social cultural aspect, they, and especially these two, they had reached its peak at this point of time. अपनी एक पीक तक पहुंच गए थे. It was a gradual evolution that has been taking place, and because of this they have reached its peak. There were various changes that took place in the political aspect, in the economic aspect, in the social aspect, in the religious aspect. तो वहाँ पे भी comparatively कुछ हद तक changes होने लगी. And we would be discussing this process very comprehensively, and I would advise all the students कि बहुत ध्यान से इसको समझें in the context of a conceptual clarity that is required at this point of time. The first thing that we would be taking is in the context of political aspect, how this evolution it reached its peak in the context of political aspect. The first thing that is there that has to be playing a very very important role is basically in the consideration at this point of time was that Jan had earlier got transformed into what is called as Janpad, that later on got at this point of time 6th century BC that got transformed into Mahajanpadas. Jan means a group of people occupying a particular territory. Janpad means a group of people occupying a particular territory. Mahajanpad means a larger group of people occupying a larger territory. So therefore, what was taking place? There was emergence of the Mahajanpads that were taking place at this point of time. There were a remarkable progress that has been achieved at this point of time. It was a culmination of the process that has started in approximately around 1500 BC. जब हमने किया था, the highest political unit at that particular point of time was Jan, headed by Janesha or Gopa or Rajan at this particular point. Therefore, what was there was at Jan se transformed into Janpad into Mahajanpad. How this take place? Basically, in the consideration, आप समझोगे, for example, there was certain territorial conquest that must have taken place. Certain diplomacy must have also played a very important role. कहीं पे कुछ पॉजिटिव डेवलपमेंट हो रहा है, कहीं पे कुछ पॉजिटिव डेवलपमेंट हो रहा है, and therefore territorial expansion when these were taking place either in the context of what is called as territorial conquest or in the context of what is basically called as diplomacy, resulted into a territorial expansion of this Janpad, or for example, the territorial expansion that took place in 6th century BC, and therefore these Janpad got transformed into Mahajanpad at this point of time. How this Mahajanpad were there, we would be discussing it again in a very very comprehensive format. तो कैसे कैसे Mahajanpad वहाँ पे emerge होने लगे. Not only this economic aspect, हम इसको भी करेंगे, political को शुरू करेंगे. पहला Janpad that was there. Second was इसी context में the economic aspect. How this economy that helped in this particular point of time. Basically in the consideration that the economic base that has comparatively got enriched at this point of time. The economic base had comparatively got strengthened at this point of time. What do you understand by economic base got strengthened? Earlier we said that in the later Vedic time period, it was we have moved into a phase of agriculture surplus, and when there would be agriculture surplus, art and craft and trade and commercial activities would be there, and art and craft activities and trade and commercial activities, when those things would be there, therefore it comparatively becomes important that the king now will be having a good amount of money also along with him, kiske liye, so that he, from the taxes that has been imposing on various manufacturing activities, from the trade and commercial activities, he has been imposing various amount of taxes also. तो वहाँ पे काफी important role तैयार हुआ, and this solid material base that was prepared because of the agriculture surplus played a very important role in the growth of these Mahajanpads also. महाजनपद कैसे अपने आप को ट्रांसफॉर्म करने में कामयाब हो गए थे, culmination of the different factors that were there, that were taking place. In this particular regard, iron, the role of iron increased to a great extent. अब आयरन का रोल कंपेरेटिवली बढ़ गया. What we were saying that till the 6th century BC, majority of the role that iron played was basically in the context and consideration of the making of the weapons also. From 6th century BC onwards and 5th century BC, the role of iron in agriculture also increased to much greater extent. Now the people, they started thinking, if iron, a stronger metal, could be used for making weapons, it could also be used for making agriculture implements also, agriculture tools also. As iron was used for making agriculture implements, agriculture tools, sickles and other things, for example, the plowshare has been of iron has been found. Therefore, that led to further increase in the agriculture production that prepared the further boost also at this point of time. Not only this, as the environment here was comparatively much more better, and therefore it provided that the population was high. In these Mahajanpadas, the population was comparatively very high, and because of the population, the king could now be in a position to recruit more number of the soldiers. अगर आपके पास ज़्यादा पैसा है, you can be in a position to recruit more number of the soldiers. No, and this more population could be used for multiple purposes. Pehla, you are having the good amount of money with you, and that money is basically coming from art and craft, trade and commercial, and from the agriculture purpose. So वहाँ पे you will be wanting that we will be making more and more of the money, and more of the soldiers could be recruited also. तो वहाँ पे soldiers को भी recruit कर सकती है. Therefore, your military comparatively became strong at this point of time. When the military was strong, not only this, but another thing that was there, when population is there, first point, it will be giving rise to military, and not only military, but also economic production also increased, because now the more and more people could be engaged into various activities, और जब अलग-अलग activities में अलग-अलग लोग involve हो जाएंगे, तो वहाँ पे automatically और ज़्यादा help होने लग जाएगा. Therefore, Mahajanpadas that were coming up. Mahajanpada अलग से टॉपिक भी करेंगे, लेकिन यहाँ पे एक ओवरव्यू आपको दे रहे हैं 6th century BC में the political changes that were taking place. Jan got transformed into Janpad in the later Vedic period, and in the after the later Vedic period in the 6th century BC, also known as the post Vedic period. तो वहाँ पे क्या हुआ, वहाँ पे Mahajanpad का emerge होने लगा, and the emergence of Mahajanpad, it was the political changes, political revolution that were taking place. It was basically in the context that they were there, economic aspect that is there. Mahajanpad में territorial conquest और diplomacy ने role play किया, iron played an important role, the population has increased to a great extent, and therefore because of the multiple factors that were playing a major role in this particular regard, एक benefit हुआ 6th century BC में अब Mahajanpad अलग-अलग emerge होने लगे थे. 6th century BC में Mahajanpad emerge होने लगे थे. How many Mahajanpadas that are there? In total, there are 16 different Mahajanpad. अब Mahajanpads को एक बार इस टॉपिक को पूरा करते हैं, फिर उसके बाद इकोनॉमिक एस्पेक्ट पे पहुंचेंगे, so that it becomes important for you. Is it clear this much to everyone? रिवाइज करो इसको एक बार. आगे करते हैं। Now, in this context of Mahajanpad, we need to cover this topic in a very, very comprehensive format कि Mahajanpad के context में. In the 6th century BC, what important development had basically taken place is basically in the regard of the emergence of 16 different Mahajanpads that are there. The important literature of this time, or the important writings that were written at this point of time, out of various writings that has been there, it is the Jain literature and the Buddhist literature. Literature and Jainism literature, जिनके बारे में we would be taking that these are various authentic sources that have been there. Various Buddhist literature, for example, Anguttar Nikaya, Mahavastu, they have given a long list of different Mahajanpad, 16 different Mahajanpads that are there, which are also given in another Jain literature, for example, Bhagavati Sutra. This list has been given, but another thing that is comparatively very, very important is that we need to understand this thing in a very, very clear aspect. क्या समझने की जरूरत है? Basically in the consideration that 16 different Mahajanpads that are there, but that does not mean that these are the only literature which are mentioning about these different Janpadas. Other literature, the Brahmanical sources, also mention about various महाजनपदास, बट हम क्या कहेंगे, जो उस टाइम पे महाजनपद थे, उस टाइम पे महाजनपद अलग अलग लिटरेचर में अलग अलग मेंशन करे हुए हैं, लेकिन जो कॉमन से महाजनपदास हैं जो अलग अलग लिटरेचर में दिए हुए हैं, एंड फ्रॉम आवर यूपीएससी पर्सपेक्टिव दोज विच आर बेसिकली गिवन एज जैनिज्म लिटरेचर और बुद्धिज्म लिटरेचर, हम इनको ज़्यादा कंपेरेटिवली मान्यता देंगे. They have been there. Anguttar Nikaya, they have mentioned different Mahajanpads that are there. For example, Anga, Avanti, Ashmak, Kashi, Kaushal, Kuru, Kamboj, Vats, another literature that or Takshila, or for example these have been given. तो इनके बारे में एक तो आपको थोड़ा बहुत जब आपका मैपिंग वाला एस्पेक्ट करवाया जाएगा वहां पे भी आपको करवाएंगे. You can just have a look at the map of all these different Mahajanpads. They were located in different areas. Mahajanpads that are there, they were located in different areas. Or for example, you can have a look over here also. Out of various Mahajanpad, only one, that is Assak, is located in Deccan part. Or for example, Avanti, Matsya, Sursen, Kuru, Kandar, Kamboj, Panchal, Kaushal, Vats, Chedi, Magad, Kashi, Vriji, Mallas and Ang. The different Mahajanpads that are there at this particular point of time, और अलग-अलग Mahajanpad है वहाँ पे. These were conquering the nearby areas at this point of time. तो वहाँ पे important role है. Out of 16 different Mahajanpads that are there, अभी हमने किया कि what were the causes कि ये महाजन जन से महाजनपद कैसे धीरे-धीरे transform हो गए. Firstly, secondly, out of these 16 Mahajanpad, the Mahajanpad that emerged as most powerful was the Magad, that got transformed from Magad, from Mahajanpad into an Indian empire, into an all Indian empire, and what is later on called as the Indian subcontinental empire under the Mauryas that was there. 16 डिफरेंट महाजनपद इमर्ज हुए. इसमें से मगध सबसे बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट इमर्ज हो गया. एंड मगध के रूलर इतने पावरफुल थे, वी विल बी डूइंग दीज वन बाय वन, इतने पावरफुल थे दैट इन्होंने ऑल इंडिया एम्पायर बनाने में कामयाब हो गए. एंड लेटर ऑन इन द रीच द नेक्स्ट लेवल आल्सो, वेयर दे बेसिकली गॉट ट्रांसफॉर्म्ड इनटू एन इंडियन सबकॉन्टिनेंटल एम्पायर अंडर वेरियस किंग्स. दे वर इंपॉर्टेंट. तो यहाँ पे आपको पता होना चाहिए कि मेजॉरिटी इज नॉट रिक्वायर्ड. फॉर एग्जांपल कौन किसके साथ लड़ रहा है, दैट इज बेसिकली नॉट अ पार्ट ऑफ द मेंस एस्पेक्ट. तो वो आपको कंपैरेटिवली मेंस का एस्पेक्ट नहीं है. बट देयर आर डिफरेंट महाजनपद्स दैट आर देयर. द महाजनपद आर ऑफ अ टू कैटेगरी एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. आई हैव गिवन फॉर एग्जांपल डिस्क्रिप्शन अलग अलग किसकी किसकी फाइट चल रही थी, बट दैट इज नॉट इम्पॉर्टेंट फ्रॉम दिस मेंस पर्सपेक्टिव. लेकिन आपको समझने के लिए कि थोड़ा थोड़ा आप वहाँ पे उनके बारे में पता कर सकते हैं. But when these Mahajanpads they emerged, they were of a two form, two nature and character. One is basically the kingship form that emerged. Next was the republic that emerged this one. कुछ kingship थे, कुछ republic थे. Now, थोड़ा सा एक रिकॉल करते हैं जो हमने पहले पढ़ा था अर्ली वैदिक से लेटर वैदिक रिलीजन में. द अर्ली वैदिक रिलीजन वाज कंपेरेटिवली अ सिंपल रिलीजन. वहां पे कंपेरेटिवली काफी ज्यादा एक सिंपल रिलीजन था. जो कंपेरेटिवली पहले एक सिंपल रिलीजन था, लेटर वैदिक टाइम के ऊपर ये काफी एक कॉम्प्लेक्स रिलीजन की तरह वहां पे इमर्ज होने लगा. Some people were not happy with the development that was taking place with the emergence, with the coming up of what is known as, what is called as various big sacrifices that were there. Ashwamedh sacrifice, Vajpayee sacrifice, Rajasuya sacrifice, and other sacrifices they were there from the birth, or even when the girl was pregnant, tab se leke, for example, till the death of the person, huge number of big sacrifices were basically being conducted. Some people thought that this is not the real or the true way of the Vedic life. कुछ ना कुछ गड़बड़ हो गया. And therefore, they moved into what is called as jungles, wrote and composed various books over there, and they are known as Aranyaks, जो हमने पहले वहाँ पे किया हुआ है. Aranyakas, they came up, where the person was basically talked, or basically they were basically meditating in the jungles, and therefore they were thinking about themselves. And every Vedic hymn that was there, that was interpreted in a philosophical aspect. Another aspect was their Upanishads, where people they got continuously started thinking, और वहाँ पे Upanishad means to sit near someone, और वहाँ पे आके फॉर एग्जाम्पल फिर गुरु ज्ञान दे रहा है, फिर वहाँ पे अलग अलग फिलोसफीज वो कंपेरेटिवली वो इमर्ज होने लगी है. The philosophical aspect of religion was comparatively becoming important at this point of time. ये हुआ आपके religious aspect में. But on the other hand, political aspect में भी क्या हुआ? Political aspect was earlier the king was basically being appointed. Now, in the later Vedic period, or even at the end of the early Vedic period, the king was basically had become hereditary. Some people did not like this changed format that was taking place in the political aspect also. They moved into areas there, and they were not located on the fertile plains. And move हो गए, they left everything, moved into other areas. और कहाँ पे comparatively वो move होने लगे? In the foothills of the Himalayas, or for example, located कहाँ पे? Foothills of Himalayas, or for example, बाद में भी जब later 6th century BC के बाद भी, for example, in the northwestern part of the country, what I am trying to say is they were basically located in those areas where the land was comparatively less fertile as compared to other areas of where the kingship or the rule of the king was basically over there, hereditary system. इस तरीके से वो चल रहा था. Firstly, second aspect, this republican system, for example, Vajjis, for example, the Lichvis that are there. Republican system was there, and they had 7,707 राजास. यार इतने राजा डिसीजन कैसे ले पाओगे? यहाँ पे कोई प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं है यार, किंगशिप है, जो राजे ने बोल दिया सही गलत वो बात की बात है, लेकिन वही डिसीजन माना जाएगा. दैट वाज व्हाट वाज बेसिकली टेकन इनटू कंसीडरेशन इन दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. और यहाँ पे क्या था कि रिपब्लिकन सिस्टम में 7,707 राजा डिस्कस कर रहे फिर डिसीजन लिया जाएगा. देयरफॉर इट कंपैरेटिवली बिकम डिफिकल्ट एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम कि अग्रेसिव एक प्रोग्रेसिव एक सोच रखना कंपैरेटिवली मुश्किल हो गया था. Therefore, what was developing, what was coming at this point of time was that we need to rethink upon the development that were taking place. जैसी वो comparatively एक less progressive सोच थी, therefore they were not in a position to expand themselves to such a great extent. Why? Because आपको सबके consensus के साथ ही चलना पड़ता था. पहला, the second problem was basically the consideration that the resources where these republics were located, they were comparatively very little, and therefore they could not have a very huge amount of army. Possible नहीं था. Not to this, their social customs and traditions, for example, was also comparatively a problem. They wanted that the purity of the blood has to be maintained, and to such an extent that even there are instances, examples of the brothers and sisters getting married to each other. लेकिन यहाँ पे They were willing to use all fair and foul means कि कोई चक्कर नहीं है, कैसे भी है शादी करनी है जी, अगर दहेज में कुछ मिल रहा है ले लो, शादी करो, और दूसरे फॉर एग्जांपल शादी कर लो ताकि दूसरा बंदा हमारे ऊपर अटैक ना कर सके. These developments were taking place, for example, in the region of Magad, where certain development that were taking place. For example, Magad का king Bimbisari was there. इसने क्या किया? He conquered अंग को conquer कर लिया. अब now there were every chance that these would be attacking him. तो इसने क्या किया? For example, इनके साथ शादी कर ली, कौशल वालों के साथ, और दहेज में क्या मिल गया? काशी, ये भी आपका हो गया. इनके साथ इनकी बेटी के साथ, लिच्छवीज की बेटी के साथ शादी कर ली. एंड देयरफॉर दे आर द ओल्डेस्ट रिपब्लिक ऑफ 7,707 राजाज. आप उनके एक दिन में यार सन इन लॉ बन गए हो, आपके ऊपर अटैक थोड़ा ना करेंगे. ये आपने कॉन्कर कर लिया. इनके साथ यहाँ पे ईस्ट में क्या किया? मगध ने ईस्ट में कॉन्कर कर लिया. नॉर्थ में एंड फॉर एग्जांपल इस रीजन में क्या कर ली? इंटर इनटू अ मैरिजेस. और इस राजे ने यहाँ पे मद्रा वाले रीजन में, पंजाब रीजन में भी अपनी शादी कर ली. मत्स्य वाले रीजन में भी कंपैरेटिवली यहाँ पे शादी कर ली. यहाँ पे तो वहां पे क्या होने लगा? नाउ दीज थिंग्स, यहाँ पे अटैक नहीं हो सकता, यहाँ पे अटैक नहीं हो सकता. क्यों? यू आर बेसिकली सन इन लॉ ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर फैमिली. तो वहां पे एवरी चांसेस दैट दे विल नॉट बी अटैकिंग यू. तो यहाँ पे कंपैरेटिवली समझना पड़ेगा कि दीज किंग्स वर विलिंग टू एंटर इनटू एनी मैट्रिमोनियल अलायंसेस. किसी भी वर्ण का कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. और ये क्या बोलते? रिपब्लिकन सिस्टम वाले क्या बोल रहे थे? नहीं जी, हम अपनों से शादी बाहर नहीं करेंगे. दैट वाज द प्रॉब्लम एट दैट पर्टिकुलर पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. और जब प्रॉब्लम है तो ऑटोमेटिकली वो प्रोग्रेसिव आउटलुक वहां पे नहीं हो पाता. प्रॉब्लम इज देयर. तो यहाँ पे एक लिमिटेड नेचर एंड कंटेक्स्ट में हमें इस बात को समझना पड़ेगा कि यहाँ पे फुटेज रिसोर्सेज कम है. दीज वर विलिंग टू यूज ऑल फेयर एंड फाउल मींस टू एक्सपेंड देयर एम्पायर. But these republics were not willing to follow their footsteps, and therefore the republican system with the passage of time was not in a position to play a very fundamental, very important role in the politics of India. And later on with the passage of time, at the time of Samudragupta, तो समुद्रगुप्त पूरे के पूरे रिपब्लिकन सिस्टम को हिंदुस्तान से यहाँ पे कंपैरेटिवली खत्म कर देता है. Important. But on the other hand, these kings who are basically following the system of किंगशिप, दे प्रोग्रेस टू अ ग्रेट एक्सटेंट. वो प्रोग्रेस करने में काफी हद तक कामयाब हो चुके थे. एंड द रूलर्स फॉर एग्जांपल, दे वर देयर. द रूलर्स विल हैव अ स्मॉल लुक ऑफ द रूलर्स फॉर एग्जांपल ऑफ द हरियांक डायनेस्टी दैट इज देयर. द रूलर्स ऑफ हरियांक डायनेस्टी, just to give an example so that you can enrich your point. For example, one of the important ruler was Bimbisar of Magad. Now how this मगध एम्पायर was comparatively becoming more and more strong. अब इसको थोड़ा सा धीरे से देखते हैं. One of the king of this particular region was Bimbisar. Be very attentive. He conquered a region called अंग. ये वाला रीजन कॉन्कर कर लिया. तो अपना एम्पायर कंपैरेटिवली इतना एक्सपैंड हो गया. He entered into a marriage alliance with कौशल, इनकी बेटी के साथ शादी कर ली. and got Kashi as dowry. And Kashi was important basically in the consideration that it was lying on a trade route. तो वहां पे taxes आप comparatively लगा सकते हो. He entered into a matrimonial alliance with these people also, Lichvis. तो वहां पे क्या हुआ? आप अपने आप को यहां से भी प्रोटेक्ट कर लिया that these people will not be attacking you, और यहां से भी अपने आप को प्रोटेक्ट कर लिया that these people will not be attacking you. Not only this, he entered into a matrimonial alliance with Matsya and with, for example, यहाँ पे मद्रा वाला रीजन भी है, यहाँ पे इनके साथ भी किया. तो यहाँ पे भी क्या होगा? मैट्रिमोनियल अलायंस. आपसे कुछ दहेज में चाहे कुछ पैसा ही मिला हो, लेकिन आपके रिलेशन तो अच्छी हो गई कंपेरेटिवली. यहाँ पे कंपेयर. नॉट ओनली दिस, ही ट्राई टू एक्सपैंड हिज इन्फ्लुएंस ओवर अदर एरियाज टू सच एन एक्सटेंट कि यहाँ पे गंदार तक्षशिला वाले रीजन के साथ एक डिप्लोमेटिक एक्सचेंज हो रहा है. यहाँ का क्या हो रहा है? एक डिप्लोमेटिक एक्सचेंज हो रहा है. Exchange. For example, embassy was basically being sent at this point of time. तो क्या हुआ? बिंबिसार काफी पावरफुल रूलर था. बिंबिसार को मारने के बाद इसका बेटा गद्दी के ऊपर बैठा by the name अजात शत्रु. He killed his father and sat on the throne.
जब अजात शत्रु ने अपने फादर को मारा तो व्हाट दे सेड दैट, व्हाट द पीपल ऑफ कौशल सेड दैट, कि हम आपसे काशी जो पहले दहेज में दिया था वो वापस ले रहे हैं, आपने हमारे सन इन लॉ को मारा है। इसने कौशल के ऊपर ही अटैक कर दिया, एंड नॉट ओनली ही अटैक्ड बट आल्सो कॉन्कर्ड, नॉट ओनली ही गॉट काशी बट आल्सो कॉन्कर्ड कौशल आल्सो। अब लिच्छवीज भी प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट कर रहे थे। इट टुक 16 लॉन्ग ईयर्स एंड डिप्लोमेसी वॉर्स प्लेड अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल, और लिच्छवीज को भी हराने में कंपैरेटिवली कामयाब हो गया आफ्टर 16 लॉन्ग ईयर। तो क्या हुआ, आपने अपने आप को ये पूरे का पूरा यहाँ पे एक्सपैंड कर चुके, ये एम्पायर आपका, ये वाला पूरे का पूरा आपका आ चुका है। देयरफॉर अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल वाज प्लेड एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम। इसके बाद हर्यनक डायनेस्टी के बाद एक नेक्स्ट और डायनेस्टी वाला गद्दी के ऊपर बैठता है। फॉर एग्जांपल एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ शिशुनाग एंड अनदर किंग। अच्छा, एक पॉइंट है, मगध आल्सो हैड अ गुड रिलेशन विद अवंती आल्सो। इसके टाइम के बिंबिसार इन द कंटेक्स्ट दैट अपने रिलेशन को अच्छे कर रहा था। शिशुनाग व्हेन ही सैट ऑन द थ्रोन ही डिफीटेड, तो अभी तक फॉर एग्जांपल क्या हुआ, मगध वाला एम्पायर इतना बड़ा हो चुका है, इतना बड़ा हो चुका है। अब शिशुनाग सैट ऑन द थ्रोन, ही डिफीटेड द रूलर्स ऑफ अवंती, तो अवंती भी फॉर एग्जांपल इनके कब्जे में आ चुका है। देयर एम्पायर फर्दर एक्सपेंडेड टू अ ग्रेट एक्सटेंट एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम। लेटर ऑन नेक्स्ट किंग्स फॉर एग्जांपल नंदा, धनानंद, महापद्मानंद पहले गद्दी के ऊपर बैठा। He conquered the whole of area at this point of time. पूरे का पूरा एरिया जीत लिया, but that was continued to be maintained by another king, for example Dhananand. The empire has comparatively emerging very very important at this point of time. काफी एक important empire emerge हो गया, basically in the consideration that they were continuously winning for various reasons. तो कॉन्टिन्यूसली विन हो रहे। तो यहाँ पे क्या हुआ, द पोलिटिकल डेवलपमेंट्स दैट वर टेकिंग प्लेस, जब पोलिटिकल डेवलपमेंट्स हो रहे थे, वन किंग वाज डिफीटिंग अनदर, द किंग्स ऑफ मगध वाज कंपैरेटिवली मच मोर पावरफुल, और जैसे मगध के किंग कंपैरेटिवली काफी ज्यादा पावरफुल थे, दे वर सक्सेसफुल इन डिफीटिंग their enemies, and they were also considered as not only powerful but willing to use all fair and foul means to expand their empire to a great extent. अपने एम्पायर को किस तरीके से वो एक्सपैंड कर सकते हैं, तो वो भी उन्होंने करने की कोशिश करी। But on the other hand, some republican system was also coming up, तो वो उतना strong, powerful emerge नहीं हो पाए थे। Therefore, 6th century BC saw what is called as the emergence of the Mahajanpad, where various political development they were basically taking place. I hope it is clear to everyone. अभी तक ये first point when you talk it take into consideration कि क्या क्या 6th century BC में political developments वहाँ पे हो रहे थे। जस्ट रिवाइज दिस, एक बार स्मॉल महाजनपद वाला को एक बार रिवाइज करिए, फिर आगे मूव करेंगे। The next, after the political changes that were taking place, हमने क्या बोला है? 6th century BC was the age of revolutions that were taking place. The political revolutions were taking place basically in the consideration that how Mahajanpads they were comparatively emerging. किस तरीके से महाजनपद इमर्ज हो रहे थे, एंड महाजनपद को इमर्जेंस के कंटेक्स्ट में ही हमें इसको पूरे का पूरा देखना पड़ेगा. एंड हाउ एंड व्हाट मेथड्स वर बेसिकली यूज्ड बाय दिस पीपल, व्हाट वर द ज्योग्राफिकल कंडीशंस दैट हेल्प्ड, what was this agriculture surplus that were there, what was the economic aspect that was there, what was the role that was basically being played by various kings that were there, what were the role that was basically played by iron in this particular regard. तो इसके context में आपको पूरे का पूरा पता होना चाहिए. Not all this, 6th century BC is also an age that is associated with the economic changes that were taking place. Economic changes that were taking place. Economic changes that were taking place is multiple in this particular regard. This was a time period when Mahajanpads they were basically emerging. महाजनपद emerge हो रहे, इसका क्या मतलब है कि बड़ा territorial unit emerge हो रहा है. Large number of people occupying a larger area at this point of time, and they were basically being ruled by a king at this particular aspect. तो वहाँ पे काफ़ी बड़ा चीज़ वहाँ पे इमर्ज होने लगी थी. When the kings were there, a territorial unit was there. Firstly, second thing, हमने क्या किया था later Vedic time में various currency were basically coming into existence. For example, Nishk, for example, Satamana, for example, Krishnala, they were there. These unit of currency were earlier also there, but now they were there. As the king was comparatively becoming, or they were comparatively becoming strong, now various punch marked coin, punch में ठप्पा लगा हुआ, various punch marked coins were also being issued. Of silver and coins of copper was also being issued. These coins were there and they were comparatively issued to a great extent. और वहाँ पे क्या हो रहा था, अब जब coins issue हो रहे हैं, it is basically the monetization that has started taking place. अब जब monetization हो रही है, आप एक बात को समझ सकते हैं कि automatically that will be giving boost to what is called as trade. अब बाटर से आप कंपैरेटिवली ट्रेड की तरफ आप मूव करने लगे हैं. देयरफॉर पंच मार्क्ड कॉइन्स वर देयर दैट फर्दर गिव अ बूस्ट टू ट्रेड. और जैसे ही ट्रेड आएगा तो पैसा लोगों के पास कंपैरेटिवली ज़्यादा आएगा. जब पैसा कंपैरेटिवली लोगों के पास ज़्यादा आ जाएगा, अनदर थिंग दैट वुड बी कंपैरेटिवली बिकमिंग इंपॉर्टेंट इज दैट इन दिस पर्टिकुलर आस्पेक्ट, इन दिस पर्टिकुलर रिगार्ड, कि राजे के पास भी अब ज़्यादा चांसेस है कि वो टैक्स लगा सके. नॉट ओनली दिस, 6th century BC में अभी तक जितना भी लिटरेचर था, वो did not have any script at this point of time. It was orally transmitted till this point of time. लेकिन 6th century BC later on up to 4th century BC वहाँ पे ब्रह्मी स्क्रिप्ट इमर्ज हो गई थी. पहला पंचमार्क्ड कॉइन्स, दूसरा द ब्रह्मी स्क्रिप्ट. और फॉर एग्जाम्पल आप सिंगल लैंग्वेज में समझ सकते हो कि द स्क्रिप्ट हैज बीन देयर. This script played a very important role in the commercial transaction. लेन देन लिखित पढ़त होने लगी थी यार. When all these things could be written, कि this much amount of trade is basically being done, this much amount of commodity is being sent, other things that are there. But now, therefore, chances of corruption has comparatively reduced to a great extent. Therefore, the coming up of this script, along with the punch-marked coins, played a very important role in increasing the commercial transactions that were there. Not only this, a third important role is basically in the context that our role was basically being played by the guilds. Guilds एक term है जो पहले भी हम कर चुके हैं. That is an organization of the merchant that were there. अब आपके पास punch marked coins है, अब आपके पास script है, आपके पास an organization of the merchants है, and therefore efficient way of production could be done at this point of time in art and craft, and the trade and commercial activities could also be organized in the next higher level. Therefore, it comparatively becomes important कि role यहाँ पे play कर रहे थे. Therefore, guild also played a very important role. Not only this, the use of the iron for various implements also increased at this point of time. तो वहाँ पे और ज़्यादा important role play किया iron ने भी. Not only this, the kings that provided to a great extent unity and integrity of the region. कि आपके पास अब किंग की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है जी कि इन गिल्ड को, इन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को, इन मर्चेंट्स को, इन ट्रेडर्स को किस तरीके से आप अपने आप को मेंटेन करके रख सकते हो। तो वहां पे क्या होता है, यूनिटी एंड इंटेग्रिटी प्रोवाइडेड अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड अ सेफ्टी आल्सो फॉर ट्रेड एंड कॉमर्स। Along with this, what is called as a uniform administration ने भी काफी बड़ा रोल प्ले किया। Now, different amount of taxes were not imposed on the people. एक ही जगह पे आप टैक्स पे करोगे तो वहां पे आप पूरे के पूरे राज्य के उस टाइम पीरियड में यू कैन बी इन अ पोजीशन टू कैरी आउट फॉर एग्जांपल व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एज ट्रेड। एक इंपॉर्टेंट रोल वहां पे भी काफी ज्यादा प्ले किया गया, किस तरीके से ट्रेड एंड कॉमर्स को वहां पे इंक्रीज किया जा सकता है। Multiple factors, they were supplementing the growth of one another. Not only this, art and craft that was there and trade and commerce, both of them they boosted each other, played a very important role in boosting each other, एक दूसरे को प्रोसेस, sustained each other. एग्रीकल्चर सरप्लस वाज देयर, इस तरीके से आपको बता चुके हैं। दीज पीपल हैव मूव्ड इनटू दिस फर्टाइल गंगा ब्रह्मपुत्र डेल्टा आल्सो, गंगा रीजन, ब्रह्मपुत्र रीजन, and therefore the land over here was comparatively more fertile. When the fertility of the land was comparatively high, again surplus, again art and craft, again trade and commerce, and these coming integrating with the people of the Vale and Valley played a very important role, as these people also got indigenous knowledge from behind, और वहाँ पे indigenous knowledge में भी comparatively वहाँ काफी एक important role play किया। Wet paddy cultivation, these things were there. So what I am trying to say is the surplus was there, the secondary economic activities they were there, art and craft, trade and commerce, and सबका सब कैसे हुआ, monetization पहले था, स्क्रिप्ट आ गया, गिल्ड आ गया, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑफ द मर्चेंट, यूनिटी एंड इंटेग्रिटी वाज देयर एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, एंड अ यूनिफॉर्म एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन further gave a boost to trade and commerce. Trade and commerce boosted art and craft and trade and commerce, and all these were basically being prepared with a solid material base that was laid down by the agriculture surplus. Therefore, a good amount of economic changes had taken place at this point of time. Therefore, in the second urbanization की आप कह सकते हो कि second 6th century BC में आप वहाँ पे एक next level के ऊपर आप economic activities चले गए थे, तो economic revolution आ चुका था, जिसके चलते हुई बड़े बड़े towns अब comparatively यहाँ पे emerge होने लगे थे। Is it clear to everyone? Just revise it once. The next thing, it was during this time period that the second urbanization phase was also coming. By second urbanization, वही रहेगा how and where these towns were emerging, 6th century BC. It was during this period that this was also an age of second urbanization. Where these urban features were comparatively developing, where these urban features were coming, they were basically coming at this point of time. तो अर्बन सेंटर्स दो तीन जगह पे इमर्ज हो सकती होती है. If we take into consideration the first, political aspect. Second, if it is an art and craft center. Third, if it is trade and commercial center. Fourth, if it is some religious center. Political in the context of, or for example, any manufacturing center in the context of the, for example, the capital of a particular king. This can be in the context of a manufacturing center. This can be, for example, in the context of port. This can be, for example, related to any of the particular aspect or religious guru that can be there. उसके साथ वो associate होता है. तो कहीं पे भी ये terms towns emerge हो सकती है. Different towns were there. अलग अलग when you read various literature, for example, Brahmanical literature पढ़ते हैं या कुछ भी और पढ़ते हैं तो वो कुछ लोग कहते हैं these towns, for example, Shravasti and other, they were established by different kings. लेकिन कुछ बोलते हैं ये धीरे धीरे अपने आप धीरे धीरे मर. श्रवस्त was the name of a king, तो श्रवस्ती हो गया. तक्षशिल was the name of king, तो तक्षशिला हो गया, तक्ष के से नाम से. But other literature say that कुछ टाउन से कंपैरेटिवली पहले से ही इमर्ज हो रहे थे, नाम पहले से ही थे. तो ये स्टोरीज अलग मानना या नहीं मानना आपकी बात है कि ये किंग के नाम के ऊपर है या वैसे ही धीरे धीरे मर्ज हुआ है. कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट कैपिटल है, व्हेन द इंपॉर्टेंट कैपिटल जैसे दिल्ली है या स्टेट कैपिटल्स है, डिफरेंट पीपल दे मूव फॉर वेरियस एस्पेक्ट्स, वहां पे अपने आप मूवमेंट होने लग जाती है, वहां पे टाउन इमर्ज हो जाता है. कोई आर्ट एंड क्राफ्ट मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट एरिया है तो वहां पे ऑटोमेटिकली ज्यादा मैन्युफैक्चरर्स आ जाते हैं. ट्रेड करने के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट पोर्ट है, लोग वहां पे मूव करते हैं. रिलीजियस एस्पेक्ट है, वहां पे कंपैरेटिवली लोग मूव करते हैं. देयरफॉर डिफरेंट टाउन्स दे स्टार्टेड कमिंग अप एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. बीट द कैपिटल एस्पेक्ट, एग्रीकल्चर सरप्लस से वहां पे नगर जो वर्ड कभी कभी देखने को मिलता था लेटर वैदिक टाइम पीरियड में, अब बड़े बड़े टाउन्स यहां पे इमर्ज होने लगे थे. इट वाज एन एज ऑफ सेकंड अर्बनाइजेशन दैट वाज देयर. द नंबर ऑफ आर्ट्स एंड क्राफ्ट हैव इंक्रीज्ड टू अ ग्रेट एक्सटेंट. एग्रीकल्चर सरप्लस वाज वेरी हाई. Trade and commercial centers were basically being set up, and for example at this point of time a port called Tamralipti port, the eastern coast, played an important role in trading aspect also. When you talk about the Magadhan as an empire, it had an important control over what is called as the inland route. अलग अलग ट्रेड रूट जैसे काशी हो गया, अलग अलग ट्रेड रूट्स यहाँ से क्रॉस कर रहे थे, एंड ताम्रलिप्ति पोर्ट के ऊपर भी आपका कंट्रोल है. The flow of the income that is taking place to the king also increased to great extent at this point of time. तो वहाँ पे काफी ज़्यादा changes वो भी होने लगे थे, काफी changes भी emerge होने लगे थे. Therefore, different towns like Vaishali, Saket, Vaishali, Maheshmati, etc. Various towns they started coming up, emerging in these particular regions. जैसे आपको लिस्ट ऑफ महाजनपद भी दी है तो वहां पे इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अस टू अंडरस्टैंड इट. इसको हमने यूज कहां पे करना है. नॉट ओनली दीज चेंजेस, सेकेंड अर्बनाइजेशन, इकोनॉमिक एस्पेक्ट, पॉलिटिकल एस्पेक्ट, बट आल्सो इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट दैट द सोशल एस्पेक्ट वाज आल्सो कमिंग अप. 6th century BC, great amount of transformation that was there. So what was happening was art and craft and trade and commercial activities they were engaged into, and the agriculture surplus was also there. So because of these things, the amount of money with the Vaish class of people, Vaishya population के पास monetary या money comparatively बढ़ गया था, and therefore they were started looking for and what is called as upliftment in their varna system. जो ब्राह्मणिकल ऑर्डर है, ब्राह्मण, क्षत्रिय, वैश्य एंड शूद्रा, थर्ड कैटेगरी है। देयर सेइंग कि पैसा पूरा हमारे पास है, एग्रीकल्चर सरप्लस हम कर रहे हैं, आर्ट एंड क्राफ्ट, ट्रेड एंड कॉमर्स हम कर रहे हैं, लेकिन तीसरी कैटेगरी है, दे वर लुकिंग फॉर एन अपॉर्चुनिटी, अ सोशल चेंज, दे वर लुकिंग कि हमें इसको छोड़ के कहीं पे और ज़्यादा हमें मूव करने की जरूरत है। It is therefore important for us to understand this particular कि social changes भी comparatively वहाँ पे काफ़ी हद तक रोल प्ले कर रहे थे। Not only this social changes, but also religious changes were also taking place, and these religious and social changes, they were also clubbed with each other. That played a very important role in coming up, or for example of the Buddhism aspect, कि वहाँ पे Buddhism और Jainism कैसे emerge होने लग गया, इसको समझने की जरूरत है। The religious changes, the religious aspect of the 6th century BC. समझने की जरूरत है। The Brahmanical religion that was there had comparatively become very complex and beyond the understanding of the common masses, बहुत ज़्यादा मुश्किल हो गया था और समझ भी नहीं आ रहा था लोगों को। Therefore, people were looking for a religion that is comparatively very simple and in the language of the masses which they could understand to a great extent. जिस language को comparatively वो समझ भी सकते हैं, they were looking in that particular context. पहली बात. Second thing, not only this, but it is also equally important for us to understand that the language, the Sanskrit that was there, that was not understood by the people. उनको संस्कृत language समझ नहीं आ रही थी. Therefore, लोगों को लग रहा था ये धर्म ऐसा जो हमारे समझ से बाहर है. Problems were basically coming at this point of time. Firstly, second aspect, there was certain category of the people जिनको लग रहा था यार एक alternative की जरूरत पड़ेगी हमें. For example, the traders who were there. They had to go out for trade across the seas. लेकिन यहाँ पे क्या था, क्रॉस द सीज ट्रेडिंग एस्पेक्ट सब कुछ वहाँ पे कंपेरेटिवली बहुत ज़्यादा पॉसिबल था और ट्रेड बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहा था. Clubbed with, for example, guilds, organization of the merchants, script that was coming up, or punch-marked coin that were there, unity and degree, multiple things that were taking place, had given boost to trade and commercial activities. चलते trade and commerce बहुत high level के ऊपर पहुँच गया था. These developments were basically taking place. But the Brahmanical religion at that point of time did not allow, or for example, these people to trade, did not allow the people to go beyond the sea. अगर समुद्र क्रॉस करके चले जाओगे, crossing the sea was considered a sin at that point of time. So these people started thinking, यार ये क्या बात हुई? The Brahmanical literature was, the Brahmanical hold that was there at that point of time was saying that you cannot go for a trade crossing the sea. Problem है because अब वहाँ पे जाओगे, you do not know who is making your food, आपका खाना कौन बना रहा है. Therefore, when these people they are coming after trading in this particular region, तो वहाँ पे क्या हो रहा था, ट्रेड करने के बाद जब ये लोग वापस आ रहे थे, इनको इज्जत नहीं मिल रही थी. They were thinking, यार ये क्या बात हुई? Not only money lending, usury was not also being allowed at that point of time. तो ये बोल रहे थे यार बिना पैसे ब्याज के ऊपर लेन देन से हम अपना ट्रेड कैसे करेंगे, हम अपनी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कैसे करेंगे. When these people used to come back after trading, good respect was not given. They started thinking कि ऐसे धर्म का क्या फायदा जो हमें इज्जत ही नहीं दे रहा है. Looking for an alternative, the social, the religious changes they were coming up, and these people, mind the words, इससे पहले वाला point किया, these people have comparatively become very rich on the account of the wealth that these people have accumulated. Important. Not on this agriculturist class. The Brahmanical religion, they were saying that the cattle that are there, they need to be massacred or sacrificed for various sacrifices. तो लोग क्या सोच रहे थे, we need cattle for agriculture purposes यार. When we need cattle for agriculture purposes, how can we sacrifice these animals? There were difference of point of views that were coming up. On the one hand, they were wanting these animals for sacrificial purposes. On the other hand, the common farmer at that point of time needed these animals what is called for agriculture purpose. आपस में the religion was becoming comparatively very very difficult at this point of time और लोगों को लगने लगा कि यहाँ पे comparatively काफी ज़्यादा difficulty emerge हो रही है and they were causing problems at this point of time. Common people were dissatisfied because the religion has gone beyond the understanding. The traders were not happy. The agriculture class of people was not happy at that point of time, and they were looking for a superior status at that point of time, on the account of the wealth that these people have accumulated. At this point of time, the religions that came up and influenced and appealed to the population was basically Buddhism and Jainism. Buddha, he put forward his religion in a comparatively very simple aspect. Dukh hai, there's suffering, there's a cause of suffering, and cause of suffering is a desire. Buddha ne kya bola? There are four noble truths that are there. Pehla, there is a suffering that is there. Second, there is a cause of suffering, and cause of suffering is desire. And you want to end the suffering, and you have to end suffering and attain nirvana, and attain nirvana by following this eightfold path. अब लोग लगने लगा यार ये तो बड़ा सिंपल सा बाबा है, बड़ी सिंपल तरीके से इसने धर्म को बता दिया. क्या बोला? दुख है, दुख का कारण है, एंड किया जा सकता है, इस तरीके को करो अटेंड और मोक्ष को प्राप्त करो. That appealed to the people. The Buddha himself was a very down-to-earth personality and was in a position to understand the pulse of the people. He spoke in the common language of the masses, the Pali. लोगों को लगा यार simple religion. Therefore, it was in the context, similar context, Jainism also emerged. Buddhism became more popular because it did not follow an extreme ideas. It followed a middle path, also referred as Tariqa Itidal Varasme Myana Ravi. Therefore, it was the religious changes that were taking place. The 6th century BC की जब बात करते हैं, it was the age of revolutions. Social changes, economic changes, political changes, urbanization, religious changes. तो जब 6th century BC की बात करते हैं, all these things should be coming to your mind to enrich yourself. किस तरीके से ये changes comparatively हो रही थी. I hope it is clear to everyone. Revise it once. Any problem till now? आगे मूव करते हैं. Next is very very important. The rise of the Magadhan Empire. Important aspect. It is important to understand that out of the 16 different Mahajanpad that were there, it was Magad that emerged as the most successful one, firstly, and secondly, it was in a position to set up an all India empire and an Indian subcontinental empire that basically emerged at this point of time. तो वहाँ पे इंडियन सब कॉन्टिनेंट एम्पायर वहाँ पे उस टाइम पे इमर्ज हो चुका था. इट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड. So when we take into consideration कि multiples were there, but only one could be the most successful they emerged. There must have been certain special reasons that were there कि एक ऐसे कारण है जो दूसरी जगह पे तो हमें नहीं देखने को मिलते इतने अच्छे लेवल पे, but those factors and forces we were in a position to locate in the Magध region. जैसे हमने किया था हड़प्पन सिविलाइजेशन, ओरिजिन या डिक्लाइन होने का कोई एक कारण नहीं हो सकता, ये खास करके डिक्लाइन होने का कोई एक कारण नहीं हो सकता. मल्टीपल रीजंस आर एसोसिएटेड विद द डिक्लाइन ऑफ द हड़प्पन्स. अदर थिंग्स आर ऑल्सो देयर. तो यहाँ पे जब बात कर रहे हैं कोई एम्पायर इमर्ज हो रहा है, इट इज़ नॉट द सिंगल रीजन जिसकी वजह से वो इमर्ज होगा. देयर वुड बी डिफरेंट मल्टीपल आस्पेक्ट्स विच वुड बी प्लेइंग अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल. इसके चलते हम कहेंगे कि अब मगधन का एम्पायर इमर्ज हो गया. दोज पॉजिटिव डेवलपमेंट्स वर नॉट पॉसिबल इन द एरियाज, बट इट वॉज पॉसिबल ओवर हेयर ओनली. So we would be taking into consideration what was the role that was played. The first is the role that was played by geography, geographical factors. Role that was played in the context of the geographical factor कि geography ने किस तरीके से role play किया. The first thing, it provided a strong base that was there. Strong base in the context that when you are located in a particular area, तो वहाँ पे आपका base comparatively काफ़ी ज़्यादा strong हो जाएगा, strong material base हो जाएगा. आपके पास population है, the environment is comparatively better, तो वहाँ पे पहला क्या role play किया था? Basically in the consideration that population was comparatively high at this point of time as the environment was better, because of which the people could be there, more people could be recruited in the army. Not all this. इसके साथ ही geographical है, the material base was also strengthened at this point of time. तो वहाँ पे क्या हुआ, आपके पास ज़्यादा material base है, the comparatively it is important that the army could also be could be more. Another, we would be comparing this geographical aspect and the economic strength. Geography plus how it provided the economic strength to the region as a whole. तो ये आपको comparatively पता होना चाहिए कि geography ने economic strength that was there. तो पहले बात, this was an area that where the location of the alluvial plains were there. वहाँ पे alluvial plains है जिसकी वजह से the agriculture production was comparatively very high. When the agriculture production was very high, the surplus could be there, art and craft and other activities could also be there. Water resources were there जिसके चलते हुई agriculture production बढ़ गया. Agriculture production के बढ़ने से क्या हुआ, economic strength से क्या हुआ, agriculture production comparatively आपका आर्ट एंड क्राफ्ट ट्रेड रिकॉर्ड्स में लगे. ज्योग्राफी के कंटेक्स्ट के लोकेशन में ही आपको कंपैरेटिवली और भी ज़्यादा होने वाला है. फॉर एग्जांपल द लोकेशन ऑफ द आयरन माइंस, you are having an access to the iron mines, therefore iron tools and implements were basically be used. और इस टाइम पे ऊपर these tools were also used for agriculture purposes also. तो वहाँ पे और ज़्यादा comparatively benefit होने लगा, agriculture और ज़्यादा develop हो गया. Art and craft activities also there, and the trade and commercial activities would also be further giving a boost at this point of time. And natural resources, new art and craft and trade and commercial activities, they started emerging at this point of time. as these Harappans were having an access or a control over inland trade and even the port also, they were in a position to have a good amount of taxes that could be imposed, and because of taxes, good amount of money was basically flowing into these people. तो वहाँ पे economic aspect भी हो गया, यहाँ पे वो अपना taxes भी लगा सकते हैं, cess भी लगा सकते हैं. तो वहाँ पे क्या हुआ, ज्योग्राफी ने किस तरीके से आपको कंपेरेटिव इस चीज़ को स्ट्रॉन्ग करने की कोशिश करेगी. जहाँ पे आपके पास रिसोर्सेज बढ़ गए, तो ज्योग्राफी नॉट ओनली प्लेड एन इंपॉर्टेंट रोल दिस कंसिडरेशन बट आल्सो played an important role in giving the strength, economic strength to the economy of the Magad at that particular region. Not only this, geography also played an important role in the context of military also. Geography ने military strength को भी for example strengthen किया. How that was there? It was at this point of time that iron was available, and if iron was available, then iron weapons could be produced by these people. आपके पास अब comparatively काफी ज़्यादा बड़े level पे ऊपर iron weapons आ गए. That was there at this point of time. Not only this, the dense forest was there. Therefore, the availability of the wood that would be there. Therefore, the availability of, for example, elephants that would be there. आपके पास dense forest है, आपके पास wood आ गई, आपके पास elephants आ गए, timber आ गया. जब timber आ गया, you could be in a position to have chariots. जब for example, Megasthenes क्या बोलता है जो बाद में हम करेंगे, the Patliputra was basically in the particular consideration was surrounded by wooden palisade. एक wooden तरीके की दीवार सी वहाँ पे comparatively बनी हुई थी. That was important. Not only how it provided the material, military strength also in the context of the natural defense that was provided. For example, the capitals of Magadha in the context of, for example, Rajgriha earlier, surrounded by 5 hills, Patliputra, surrounded by, for example, 4 important rivers, also known as Jaladurga. So therefore, जब आप इतना natural defense आपके पास है, you do not need to be concerned or worried about your defensive purposes, and you could always be going offensive in that particular regard. तो geography ने एक बहुत ही important role play किया किसके context में, कि आपको economic context में कैसे strong किया जा सकता है, military context में आपको कैसे strong किया जा सकता है. Is it clear to everyone? Geographical वाला aspect सबको clear हुआ? Not only this, but also various social cultural factors also played an important role. तो हमने geographical किया है, second is social cultural factors. Played a very important role in the emergence of Magad. This Magad, initial point of time, was located outside the holy Aryavarta. मतलब जहाँ पे इनिशियल फेज में क्या बोलते हैं, अगर अग्नि देवता ने वहाँ पे क्रॉस नहीं किया तो इसको इम्प्योर लैंड बोला गया. इम्प्योर लैंड, कि वहाँ पे कंपेरेटिवली इम्प्योर लैंड बेसिकली इन द कंसिडरेशन, वहाँ पे क्लियरली डिवीजन इज नॉट देयर टू ब्राह्मण, क्षत्रिय, वैश्य, शूद्र, और सैक्रिफाइसेस वर नॉट बीइंग परफॉर्म्ड. और अभी रिसेंटली ही यहाँ पे आरएनआई सिस्टम हुआ था, तो ब्राह्मणिकल माइंडसेट वाज कंपैरेटिवली नॉट वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. देयरफॉर अ गुड अमाउंट ऑफ सोशल स्टेबिलिटी एग्जिस्टेड ओवर हियर. सोशल स्टेबिलिटी वाज देयर. द वर्ण आश्रम धर्म पहला, for example, stability. Secondly, Varna ashram system has not been strictly followed. Earlier, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra में सिर्फ it was the responsibility of the Kshatriya to participate in the wars and battle. But as this clear division was not there, everyone could be in a position to participate in the battlefield. Therefore, that provided a good amount of army to the people, army to the king, as army could be recruited from all the 4 Varnas. The Nandas, for example, they were the Shudras at that point of time. अधर्मिका, जो धर्म को नहीं फॉलो करने वाले, तो शूद्र होते हुए भी वो क्षत्रिय के रोल में राज सिंहासन के ऊपर बैठ गए. अधर्मिका इनके लिए कंपैरेटिवली बोला गया है. These people were comparatively very practical people also. अलग-अलग, for example, coming up of the heterodox sect, अलग-अलग religious sect, emergence of the Buddhism, Jainism, they were comparatively making the people more and more dependent upon the material aspect. उस context में किसी कि आप trade करो, agriculture करो, कुछ भी करो, लेकिन sacrifices मत करो. Therefore, the material aspect of the people were comparatively quite developed at this point of time, and they were looking how and in what way their progress could also be made. And these heterodox sects that were there, different sects that were coming up, different small religions that were coming up, they put forward an idea that was comparatively much more practical, much more rational, and much more logical also ideologies that were put forward at this point of time. Practical, logical, rational ideas वहाँ पे comparatively put forward भी करें, काफी अच्छे level पे. Not only this, the social cultural factor, but also equally important is the role that was basically played by the rulers. They played a very important fundamental role that were there. Policy of war and battles. क्या? और जहाँ पे जरूरत पड़ी, for example, हमने wars लड़ी. जहाँ पे जरूरत पड़ी, हमने diplomacy करी. यहाँ पे जरूरत पड़ी, for example, matrimonial alliances भी करे. But also being undertaken at this point of time. They were willing to use all fair and foul means. Take for example, Bimbisar, हमने अभी किया है. He conquered Ang and also entered into various matrimonial alliances also. और वहाँ पे अलग-अलग matrimonial alliances में भी तो enter किया. कौशल के साथ, लिच्छवीज के साथ, मत्स्य के साथ, मद्रा के साथ मैट्रिमोनियल अलायंसेस किया एंड अपने एम्पायर को एक्सपैंड के साथ साथ सेफ भी किया वहां पे. लेटर ऑन अजात शत्रु, अनदर कैपेबल रूलर, ही कॉन्कर्ड कौशल, काशी, लिच्छवीज एंड अदर्स. Later on, for example, the next ruler who was there at this point of time, वहां पे और ज्यादा इन्होंने एक्सपैंड करने की कोशिश करी याशत्रु के बाद. Shishnag, Nag dynasty, that was the Shishnag dynasty conquered Avanti region and therefore expanded his empire later. Then Mahapadmananda, he further expanded the empire, conquered almost the first Indian empire that was established at this point of time. Later on, जब बाद में हम करते हैं चंद्रगुप्ता मौर्य, he founded what is called the first Indian subcontinental empire. And later on, this empire could be continuously under the Mauryas only. For example, Ashok, what he did at this point of time was that he tried to give, हम बाद में करेंगे, the paternal character of the state. Paternal character of the state का मतलब क्या होता है? All subjects are like my children, they could come to me at any point of time. It is my responsibility to take care of not only of the human beings, but also of the animals. Therefore constructed different hospitals for humans and for animals also. Planted various medicinal herbs. Started what is called Dhamma or Dhamma Hamatra. That was a code of conduct for moral and social upliftment of the people. Not only in this birth but also in the next birth also. तो क्या अब राजा मोनार्की के साथ साथ पैटर्नल करेक्टर भी आ चुका है कि तुम्हारी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी मेरी बनती है कि तुम्हें किस तरीके से इस जन्म में सफल करें और नेक्स्ट जन्म तक भी वो लेके चलें. All these important factors played a very important role. How, what were the reason that it was Magध that comparatively became most successful in emerging and building up what is called as an all India empire or later on the Indian subcontinental empire also. Is it clear to everyone? Just go through the notes. Any problem till now? तो ये वाला सेशन हम यहीं पे ख़त्म करते हैं एंड वी वुड बी टेकिंग द क्लासेस टुमारो, वहाँ पे इसको कंटिन्यू करूँगा बिकॉज नेक्स्ट जो टॉपिक है वो काफ़ी एक बड़ा टॉपिक हो जाएगा बुद्धिज़्म के बारे में, आइडियोलॉजीज़ के बारे में, और बुद्धिज़्म की आइडियोलॉजी के कंटेक्स्ट में उपनिषद के कंटेक्स्ट में भी क्या सिमिलरिटीज अदर थिंग्स, वो भी हमें काफ़ी हद तक वो करना पड़ता है ऑप्शनल में। तो वहाँ पे आज इस चीज़ को हम रोकते हैं कि टुमारो वी वुड बी कंटिन्यू। थैंक यू वेरी मच, टेक केयर ऑफ योरसेल्फ।